For this project, we're going to start with a warm-up, and we're going to talk about how flat shapes like this can become three-dimensional shapes using the idea of perspective. To start with, this is a circle. So what's the difference when we draw a circle versus when we draw a round sphere? Hopefully the students have some ideas. And the answer is shading or shadow. Something that's flat doesn't have shadow, but something that's round does have shadow. So then we will go in and do this shadow on one side of the circle. And all of a sudden, that creates a sense of light coming from one side and shadow on the other. And that gives it a sense of being round. And now for the square. So what's the difference between a square and a cube? Cubes have more sides. This is flat. Now we want to take our ruler, using the idea of perspective, of lines going away from us into space, and take that corners of the square, draw short lines going away, and that's the first step to creating a cube. We then take the ruler and we connect these top lines and also connect these side lines. So now we started with a square and it's become three-dimensional, a cube. Shading also makes this cube even more three-dimensional looking, the idea of light in the front and shadow on the top and the side. So we're going to go in and shade this. And just like in week 2 when we shaded the Liberty Bell, it made it appear more round, even though it's just on a flat piece of paper. Now our last shape to look at is the triangle. We want to go from a triangle to a pyramid. Again, we want to use the idea of perspective and lines going away from us to go away from the bottom and then connect the top to that side line that I just did. So all of a sudden we have a pyramid happening. And again, we're going to include shading and talk about how shading can make things look like it has light and shadow in our space. So that's the warm-up, and you're going to see how that warm-up connects with our drawing of the Washington Monument. After they're done with that, you can show them a picture of the Washington Monument and allow them to see what they're going to be drawing for the day. Then for the final drawing, they'll each have a piece of paper, and they'll still need their ruler and their pencil. Whenever we do a landscape with perspective, we're going to start with the horizon line. I'm going to put this one right there in the middle, but actually horizon lines can go anywhere on the paper. Next, I'm going to do my vanishing point that all things will vanish towards. This one will go in the center, but you can tell your students they can actually go anywhere along that horizon line. It doesn't matter where they're placed. The monument will be up here and the reflecting pool will be down there. To create the idea of that long reflecting pool getting away from us into space, getting smaller, I'm going to be using these side lines like this that go towards the bottom of the paper from that vanishing point. So all of a sudden it looks like something that's wide is getting smaller as it goes away from us. The reflecting pool is actually more of a rectangle. Right now this is a triangle. And I'm going to create that rectangle look by drawing a horizontal line between this side and this side of that triangle I made. I'm going to leave my vanishing point there, but I no longer need these lines there. But it was a help in the beginning to get me that look of vanishing away, and then I can take away the part that I no longer need. For the Washington Monument, it's actually going to be slightly above my reflecting pool, so I'm going to leave a space, and then I'll do another slightly shorter horizontal line. The monument gets slightly skinnier at the top, so I'm going to lean my ruler in, but do a nice long tall line up the paper and do the same thing, kind of leaning into the other side from over there. Hopefully they were able to look and study the picture of the Washington Monument to see those subtleties in its shape. we then get to connect the two lines at the top for the top of that. So this is the base, and we also need a top. The shape of the top is like a triangle, so I'm going to do a line, or excuse me, a point at the top, and connect that to one side, and then connect it also to the other. This is similar to the square and the triangle that we started with in our warm-up. But we're going to take the square, we're going to take the triangle, and make them look more three-dimensional. How did we do that in the beginning? We made lines going away from us into space. So I'm going to do one there at the bottom and one there at the top. So now I can turn my ruler, connect these two like I did with the cube, and all of a sudden, my Washington Monument is starting to look a lot more three-dimensional. And then what we did with the triangle in the beginning was to connect the top with that side. So I'll take my ruler and make this into a pyramid shape, just like we did in the beginning with our warm-up. When we shade things, it's going to make it look like sunlight. And this is outside, so I really want the idea of the sun hitting the side and the shadow on the other. So I'm going to do a light shadow up here. And then what would I do on the side? It's going to be even darker. And of course, shadows change based on where the light source is. So I'm assuming that my light source is coming in from the left-hand side. And your students would go and fill that in as dark as they want throughout that whole thing. Now my Washington Monument is still a little bit thick, so I could have made this quite a bit skinnier because it's a really tall, skinny monument, so that proportion is quite a bit off. Now, since you have older students who have hopefully been doing perspective drawings for quite a few years now, we're going to add another element to this using perspective and showing them how to use perspective lines to create other things in the environment. We can still see our vanishing point because we're still going to use that in our next step. There's a row of trees going down either side of the reflecting pool, and that's what I'm going to draw next. I'm going to very lightly do a line from my vanishing point towards the side of my paper. My trees are very tall. They're even going to be above the horizon line over here. So I'm going to do a very light line, again from the vanishing point up the side of the paper there. Obviously, we know trees are not shaped like a triangle. So what are we going to do? We're simply going to use this as a guideline to make sure that our trees are getting smaller towards the horizon. And then we'll erase that guideline when we're done. So I'm going to start with a big tree here. And he has his little trunk there. And then behind it, oh, this one is going to naturally get smaller because my guidelines are showing me to do that. And again, smaller and smaller. So we can see how those guidelines tell us the height and the bottom point to do things, but we can create any shape within that. And then we can go in and take away that guideline. So we're simply left with the trees in perspective. And of course you would want to take away that horizon line because the trees are blocking that. Of course we know as we look at it that our eyes tell us there is a horizon there. We simply fill in what we cannot see. So now we want to see, did the students understand the idea of these trees in that guideline to the horizon point? And you want them on their own to do it on this side. So they would have to flip it like a mirror image and do the same thing. And of course, if students need help, you can help them. But hopefully they've understood that we start with our guidelines, the same on each side. And they would go in and do the same thing with the big trees, getting smaller towards that, and then erasing any of the guidelines they no longer need. After they're done with the trees, they can go in and add other things to their scene. If they want to draw things in the water, or if they want to draw more things in perspective, like people sitting or clouds in perspective, they could do that. Again, they want to use the idea of things going towards the vanishing point. So if I wanted to do clouds, I could say, all right, I know the cloud is big here. I'm following my guidelines for those clouds to get smaller and smaller away from me into space. And if there's time, they can do colored pencils and fill in this area with color. If not, just spend the time using your pencil and ruler to play with perspective.